if you guys don't know me at all, I come from a non-Christian background. I was an atheist for a long time until about 13 years ago. And I have a conversion story that I'd love to share with you because I think our God gives us our stories to share with other people. And I think there's power in those stories. And well, mainly, I'm not just a Christian because it makes me feel good. I'm not a Christian because it gained me more friends. I certainly had a lot of friends when I was an atheist. I'm not a Christian because it made me more money. I certainly made a lot more money when I was an atheist even. I'm a Christian because it's true. It's a true story of reality. It accurately reflects the way things really are. And if I'm going to share my story with you guys today listening to Stand to Reason, I have to start at the beginning of my story. And actually, my story begins, as all good stories do, with I met a girl. I was living in Washington, D.C., working at a law firm, Jenner and Block, and having a great life out there. And I came out here to visit to Southern California. It was absolutely beautiful, and I could not go back to D.C. And eventually I said, I want to live out here. And on my first night out in California as a permanent resident, I actually met my wife, and well, she wasn't my wife at the time, obviously, but I was at a work party for my wife, and actually she was my sister's boss, and she introduced me, my sister, to Rihanna, and I started dating her after a couple months, and I was an ardent atheist. I love to talk about the things of faith with anybody who would listen. I would really try to engage. If I found out that you were a Christian, I'd want to take you out for a cup of coffee or a drink, and I'd want to ask you why you're a Christian. And to be honest with you, most of the time when I'm sitting there with my friends, they couldn't really give me good answers. And I kind of hate to say it right now, actually. Not only did they not give me good answers, oftentimes they would get upset with me because of my questions. I could have been maybe a little too bold for some people or too blunt, but oftentimes I'd bring things up like the problem of evil. Or I'd say to you, like, how can you believe an antiquated Bronze Age book full of myths? Or I'd say, do you really believe in a zombie? Do you trust a zombie for your salvation? And I'd bring these things up for people in reference to Jesus. And most of the time I couldn't get any adequate answers. I never really interacted, I would say in hindsight, with any real good thinkers who were Christians. And my friends, they had a good heart, good intentions, and they were good people ultimately. I mean, some of them were my really good friends, and I enjoyed hanging out with them. But they never answered any of my questions. And actually, when I met Rihanna, we dated for a while, and she is in kind of an interesting area in her life, and she wasn't going to church really, and I didn't know she was a Christian right away until actually our first Easter together. We were dating, and I remember getting an email from my brother. So my whole family is atheist, and I got an email from my brother mocking Jesus. And mocking the resurrection and mocking the crucifixion. And I remember sharing this email with Rihanna and her being offended by it. And in hindsight, I can see why she was offended by it. It was definitely not. It just wasn't a good representation, and it was highly offensive. But I thought it was really funny at the time. And then she told me she was a Christian. And from then on out, I was just always trying to ask her some questions. I'd say, wait a second. Are you telling me you actually believe in Adam and Eve? This is what you really believe? Like, this is insane. Like, I can't believe you believe in Adam and Eve. Or wait, you don't believe in evolution. Or I'd bring up the problem of evil. Or I'd bring up the person of Jesus. And even Rihanna, she would admit that she didn't necessarily have the answers for me. She just always had a strong faith. And kind of around that time, she got interested in going back to church. And she actually asked if I wanted to go to church with her. And I've done crazier things for the affections of a woman. And so I said, sure, I'll go to church with you on Sunday. And we started going to church, and it was really weird for me at first. And I got saved in Studio City, California, and it was a really great church. David Polis was the pastor, or still is actually. And I remember being exposed to a Christian church for the first time ever. I'd gone to Catholic church growing up, maybe I don't know, a handful of times. And I got to meet some really fun people. I made some really good friends. And but they all believed this crazy stuff, this crazy stuff of Christianity. And I'd push into them. And again, a lot of the times I got met with the same responses. In my mind, not very intellectual, not very clearly thought out. They didn't, what I would say, I didn't think they matched up with the way the world really was. And then I went to actually a membership class with my wife because she wanted to become a member of this church. And I'm sitting there with the pastor. And my wife has an amazing story. Her life story is incredible. And she's sharing that with the pastor and his wife, and the meeting is going well. And then it came over to me, and they asked some questions about me. Well, I came to that meeting prepared. I had it in my mind that I was going to debate this pastor, and I was going to convince him that Christianity wasn't true. And I was going to get him to convert or deconvert, like all these YouTube personalities, like all these pastors who leave the faith, supposedly. I was going to get him to right then and there admit that he didn't believe what he actually said he believed, and my worldview was true. Well, that didn't happen. I asked a lot of questions, and Pastor Dave did a really good job at answering some of them. And then he did a really good job of when I gave him a question he didn't know the answer to, he said, "You know what, John, that's a really good question. I've got no idea. I got to get back to you on that." But the main thing is that during that meeting, he was very authentic, he was very real, and he was truthful to me. When he didn't know something, he didn't purport to know it. And I really, really appreciated that from him. And at the end of the meeting, Pastor Dave and his wife, they hugged Rihanna and they offered her membership to the church. And then Pastor Dave took my hand in his, he shook it. And he said, "You know what, John, we have enough members right now. We'd prefer you don't join this church." And again, I was kind of taken aback by that because I had it in my mind that they just wanted my money. That's really what membership at a church is all about. And when he didn't offer me membership, he caused me to think. And then the next thing he did would turn my worldview upside down. As he's shaking my hand and he says this to me, he turns me around to his bookshelf, and on the bookshelf he pulls a book, Can Man Live Without God, by Ravi Zacharias. And that book changed me. I started reading it, and then I read it, and then I read it again and again and again. And for the first time ever, I started being able to interact intellectually with the Christian faith. There was stuff and information in that book that had never been presented to me before. And it's like my eyes were starting to be opened. And at the same time, I was given a Bible, and then I started reading that on the metro to and from work. I lived in Hollywood, California, and I was commuting downtown where I worked at a law firm. And I read that Bible every single morning for about 3 months. And during those 3 months, my worldview was just absolutely destroyed, my worldview of atheism, naturalism. And it's mainly because I experienced what actually, and Greg Koukl the one who coined these terms, but I experienced some serious bumps into reality. You know, reality is the way things really are. That's how I describe it to my daughters. I've got 4 little girls. And during that time in my life, I was trying to live out my atheism consciously. So I was living purposefully towards being an atheist. And what I was realizing through the way that I was living is that reality didn't line up with my worldview of naturalism. And one of the main bumps that I was having was I say it's the bump that hurts. It was a bump that really hurt, and it was the cosmological argument, or the bump into stuff. The bump into stuff. And I started asking myself, and I've always been an inquisitive person. I've always been an imaginative person, where I like to wonder and I like to dream. And I'm looking up into the sky at night, and I realize all these stars are out there, and I'm just taken back by the grandeur of the universe, and how did all this come to be, and who am I in this teeny tiny, the pale blue dot, as we've come to know it, Earth, and why am I here, and how did I get here? Well, I started asking myself, well, how did anything get here? And everything around me came from somewhere. And if it came from somewhere, where was that original place? And I didn't know the term, the Kalam cosmological argument yet. I had never come across that. But I was realizing the truth of what's in that argument for the first time on my own, just wondering to myself and to my then girlfriend and soon to be wife. I was wondering, okay, I see everything around me. It has to come from somewhere, because everything that exists, everything that begins to exist has to have a cause. It comes from somewhere. And if the universe began to exist, that means the universe had a cause. And now I have to figure out what is that cause, because there's certain properties from that cause that have to be true. Greg Koukl loves to say it that the Big Bang needs a Big Banger, is what he says. And I think there's a lot of rhetorical force behind that saying, because I believed in the Big Bang, and I believe in the Big Bang today. So there was a singularity, and then there was a moment in time when everything exploded. All matter, space, and time came into existence from nothing. But nothing comes from nothing, according to my atheism. According to my naturalistic worldview, nothing comes from nothing. It has to come from somewhere. And I just know this, and then like I said before, I was leaning into my atheism. I was trying to live this out as rationally as possible and as in real life. And I know nothing comes from nothing, because as I live life, things just don't appear to me. Like for example, if I were to go home today from this studio, if I were to drive home to Thousand Oaks, and parked in my driveway is a brand new Tesla X, and I go inside and I say, "Hey, oh my gosh, Ree, where's the new Tesla X from?" And she said, "Oh, nowhere." Well, obviously, I'd say, "Wait, what do you mean nowhere? I mean, it had to come from somewhere." Well, it's the same thing. If I'm driving home on the 101 and things come from nothing, things can pop into existence out of nothing all the time, meaning they wouldn't even be safe to drive around. And I started to think like this as an atheist. I was thinking like this, and I was like, wait a second. If my worldview it doesn't leave room for a big banger, where's all this come from? And when I say I had to say that it came from nothing, I mean the philosophical sense of nothing. Nothing. That which rocks dream about. Nothing. And that just doesn't describe reality. And that was my first major bump into reality, I like to say.